Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be interviewing Rachel. So how are you doing, Rachel?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I just had a pretty exciting debate on Elon Musk.
Oh,
So
that's an interesting topic for sure.
it was an interesting one. We're gonna have more discussions later. I don't think
Yeah, well,
it's got unfinished business, but I think it was a good
yeah,
discussion.
that's good. Discussions are always good,
Well,
learning new things.
do you like to learn new things?
I do. I think with something like 400 to 500 titles in my library, I think I do. Uh, I like to read. I've always been a huge reader. Um, and I like to go to places and things that I can generally learn something. Um, Cross-cultural learning is very interesting to me. Sometimes I use different things to do it, but I like to learn. I okay. I'm still I'm 27, but I'm still in school. And I've always it's always been kind of an interesting thing for me because I think for me what I like to say to people is it's always good to learn something every day. I think that it's really a shame we don't, because there's so much to learn in this world that if you don't, then I don't know, it's like it's I mean it makes your mind kind of grow a little bit, I think. And you see it in studies in older people. It's good to, you want to keep away from, I mean, there's no guarantee, of course, but if you want to keep away from dementia, it's good to keep, even word puzzles. So it's like learning something. It's stimulating your brain is always a good idea.
It is. What specific things do you most like to learn?
um, well, I'm a political science major or degree or whatever you want to say over there. But I also like history, in the humanities mostly. Sociology and psychology is interesting. Um, I think that's why I got into this stuff, because I find just learning the interesting and intricate systems is sort of fascinating. I like um, geopolitics, geography is kind of interesting. Cultural difference is really fun, in terms of like I have friends from all over the world and we talk about culture. I mean, sometimes it doesn't have to be direct culture, but kind of how their existence sort of, you can derive some culture from, like, oh, this is interesting. That's not how we do things. This is how we do things, and
Yeah.
as big ideas as a famous person in their land, or a politician, or how their politics goes, or kind of everyday life. And in a lot of ways you can get a lot from that, I think. And even within English speaking countries, like you're from Britain, I'm from the US, and or Australia, I think there's a lot of differences. And sometimes, I mean, I kickstart this with, I think a good thing that taps into culture is food. So trying new foods and also just learning culture that way is a good way to go. But online is also a really good resource. I also um, like a lot of other stuff in the humanities, like let me think. Um, I find that many disciplines, in terms of sciences, is interesting. I'm probably not the best at sciences, but I find that like health and biology is kind of interesting. Um, Slower at it because I'm not as good in the sciences, but I think, for instance, that might be interesting as well.
Mm.
Um, I like some philosophy, but I have to take it at my own time. I sort of analyze that kind of thoroughly and slowly. So um, I like um, stuff like that. Or let's see, yeah. Um,
Um, yeah, Rachel, could you just tell me a little bit about what you find more difficult about science?
um, I think For me, it's a blindness issue. It's seeing the stuff and doing the stuff. I guess in a lot of humanities you talk about it, and it's more about ideas too. But I think also, I mean, I'm not saying that blind people can't do science. There's a lot of amazing scientists who are blind. I mean, blind people can do anything. But also, I think for me, like mixing chemicals or stuff like that, and also, you know, like for instance, a lot of it is a lot of facts, like biology. I know there's biology theory somewhere, but it's like, okay, so butterflies, there's this many sorts, and memorize that, and it's like, so which one is this, you know? And like, or anatomy is all how they teach anatomy in school, at least, is, do you mind memorizing all these 500 terms, and by the test you need to tell me which bone is what? And I'm like, okay, I might be, and you know, maybe the visuals might help me, but I don't know if that will necessarily help me, because even just knowing about it, like, I'm the person who would probably research the bones anyway, but and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but when it's in a list format, it's also very, very much like that. And in a sense, you know, like lower division, that's what we call it, or basic. In the United States, we have lower division, upper division. Lower division, they give you something basic, like easy, you know, like, okay, memorize these species of things. But in upper division, they teach you how to investigate it. But in lower division, you know, stuff like that, or even geology. I took a geology class, and it was more like, here's some rocks, identify them by, do you know what color they are? Okay, good. Do you know what if they're magnetic, how much the scratch test, you know, like, you try to remember all those things in your head, but it's in history, let's just say, in history, even politics, it's more of an arc, it's more of a story, if you will. It's more of a bigger narrative to it. So it's not like I'm trying to juggle 500 facts. I mean, so we can only remember so much, I think, human beings, and that's always interesting.
Okay. And about philosophy, you said you have to sort of work that out in your own time. Why is
Yeah.
that? It takes a bit longer for you.
I think for me, maybe because it's impractical. Like, I like it, but I often like to think in terms of how this applies to real life. For instance, like, I love reading stuff like Locke and you know, Western stuff, Rousseau, and I've studied. I know. So my family's originally from Hong Kong, and I'm not saying that, you know, I mean, I'm more Western than Eastern, but I know my Confucian philosophy pretty well just on my own. I've excuse me, I don't believe my parents have really read that stuff, but I took a emotions class, and I decided to look into Ren, or Confucianism in general, and I've learned a lot by doing so. But in a lot of ways, some people can just play in the realm of, you know, let's just sit here and think about this idea, and has no other connection to real life. I sort of need a situation to say, hey, this philosophy ties into, I can use this idea. So in I took a medieval philosophy class, and the whole basis was, okay, what did Socrates say? Can you just write it out? I'm like, well, then why don't you just read Socrates? I mean, I can tell you what it is, but my question is, how does this apply? I can apply it, but I have to think about it. And so in a lot of ways, if I know my Confucianism well, for instance, how I explain it to people is I explain the cultural stuff. This is how it relates to culture. And in terms of that, how that sort of applies in terms of theory. Does that make any sense?
That does make sense to me.
Sorry, Rachel, can I ask a question as a follow-up to that? So
Sure.
you, it seems like you're really interested in learning about other cultures in various ways, like you know,
well, many different things, but cultures amongst them, yeah.
Yeah, sure, sure. Historical figures, even cuisine. Is there like a particular benefit that you like hope to gain from this, or you hope others gain? Like, is there like an end that you're trying to achieve with that?
That's a good question. And I don't mean to laugh at you, but I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what benefit this would be. It's just interesting. It's just
okay.
Like I mean, I guess I'd be more informed when I talk to somebody else, but not really. I mean, this is an interesting. I guess being more of a well-rounded person, as they usually say at universities, being diverse, I guess, but I don't know if it actually has a real. I mean, like I said, besides maybe being more cultural when you talk to somebody, but that's more of an afterthought. You know, it's like, oh yeah, Anna will do this too. You know, and in a lot of ways, when I talk to other people in other cultures, I'm not assuming, for instance, and other people are like, wow, you actually know, and they're like, oh, a lot of people say this about our culture. You know, a lot of Africans will say, oh yeah, a lot of people think Africans do this, this, and this. I'm like, yeah, well, I've done my research. I've kind of known. I mean, I think it's good to be competent in life, in terms of knowledge as well as other things, you know.
Do you, can I ask you a question? So let me frame this another way. Like if you met someone that you think, so this is like obviously of interest to you. If you, let's say you met a person that wasn't interested in learning about other cultures and didn't see this as something cool or fun or valuable, what would you like maybe think about them? Like, would you think like, oh, that's bad because XYZ, fill in XYZ?
Well, I think I try to understand the person, as I'm also into psychology. I try not to judge people. I mean, I might think that I think that people should learn, but I mean, if they don't want to learn, if they really don't want to learn, I mean, unless you're acting ignorant, you're acting like really ignorant or something, then there might be some sort of something I think about them. If they say, oh yeah, all Africans just live in caves, you know, that's absolutely like wrong. But if they're just not interested, I mean, there's other topics we can talk about, you know, like psychology. And if they're not, like, you know, then maybe like history. A lot of those people who are more traditionalist, like really not open to too much or really into history and even the politics of the land or like theory. Like, so some of them are very interested, you know, when we talk about political stuff and political theory and precedent and different things and law, and there's plenty of things to talk about, I think. And so I try to find people and what they talk about. I don't like to force topics. I used to as a teenager. It's like, you must talk about what I want to talk about. But if they're not comfortable talking about cultures, you know, I don't talk to them about it. I mean,
right.
I think I mean, unless they're willfully ignorant, I know some people who have prejudices, such as, oh, the Jews are this, you know, the Jews are that. They're you know, and maybe, you know, I mean, or if somebody says, you know, like I know a lot of in the communities, in terms of like Chinese communities, they're, oh yeah, Japanese is this and Japanese is that, and see that they're evil because they had the rape of Nanking or something like that. You know, it's like, well, but I don't think it works that way. I think you can be, you don't have to like them, but you don't have to hate them. You don't have to think such things. It's like thinking every German is a Hitler Youth or something. It's like, okay, that is wrong. I mean, you don't have to study them, but at least don't. I think ideas are valid round. I don't think anybody should be superior to anybody else. Like I don't think your race, you know, and even politics, you know, I don't think. I live in the United States. Republicans are better than Democrats, or Democrats are better than. I take a side, but I think you can prefer an idea, but you're not allowed to say, oh well, I'm better than you because I'm now this, you know, like,
right.
And even with like personality types, I think that often a lot of what I've been seeing going on is Socionics versus MBTI. Oh, Socionics is so much. I mean, okay, maybe it's closer to Young. That's what I've been learning. But why discount something else? Or, oh, I like MBTI. Why should we go to a smaller thing like Enneagram? That's like, well, but they're all interesting. We shouldn't be bashing somebody else and their views. I think we should have some sort of a level of respect. You don't have to prefer it. You don't have to like it. You don't. But calling it names like wishy-washy is a name. It's like me calling, I don't know, like whatever side you pick. I'll pick on the everybody's favorite for now. You know, like Obama, for instance. Oh, Obama is a socialist, and this, like, okay, you just called him a name. Or Trump is a fascist or whatever, or you can go on calling them many names, but can we just respect the sides? We have different ideologies, and if you understand the underlying ideologies, then maybe we can just move on and have a fair discussion of what ideas are what. I think I only stop them when it gets hostile like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, but like, for example, like what if, so you would have a problem with if someone were like loosely saying like, oh, Obama's like a socialist as a way to like discredit him. But what if someone were, because there's like some sort of, does it violate for you a kind of like respect for people that you try to show and model in your conversations? But what if,
I don't know if it's like, I think it's more like, I think it stops conversations. I mean, respect is great, but I think a good conversation, I think all ideas are valid in a lot of ways. I think ideas should be valued as ideas. They're different ideas, so we should try to, you know what I mean? It's
yes,
more of,
no, this makes a lot of sense. So I'm just trying to.
I'm trying to get your question, but
yeah, no, you're answering it really well. I'm trying to push this because I want to hear how you describe this. So, like, what if, for example, so if I were just like, oh, Obama, I hate him, he's a socialist. So that would be in your mind, like closing down an argument. But what if I said, look, like based on these policies, like it does seem like Obama's policies are socialistic or something like that.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Either side, I'm actually a Republican, but even if you said that about Trump, it's like, that's perfectly fine. You have your reasons. As long as you have reasons to back up what you're saying, I think that's valid.
Yeah. So if it's not used as like a name calling device, if it's used, if you're trying to like actually describe something accurately or
perfectly fine.
Idea. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. This makes sense.
I just don't, I mean, I don't like, as a kid, we're discussing this all week long because of some events and other things related to socionics or MBTI, so basically, as a kid, my big question is why? And so in a lot of ways, when I was a kid, my dad always thought, oh, you're disrespecting me, but I asked why to everybody, it's like, okay, you think this, so why? Do you have any backing? And some people don't. It's like, I just think this. It's like, okay, great, that's your idea. I guess you can hold that idea, but if you intend to change my mind, or if you really want to have a discussion, we kind of need to expand on this because, I mean, otherwise, I don't really know what to say. I mean, there's not much to say. I like this. I don't like this. Well, I like this too, and I don't like this too. So, what of it? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think if you really want a discussion, if you want a real, I like, you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think we do.
Yeah. I'm okay.
Rachel,
I'm just making sure this makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah,
Rachel,
okay.
I want to ask, what is it you say is the single most valuable thing that you have learned?
That's a really hard question. Like a category or a fact or like a what are you talking about?
Anything that you want to choose, anything which you feel is the most valuable.
I think a category would be historical context and and like political stuff. I think it's important to be aware of sociological like developments and like political and historical developments developing in your nation or the world, and which is why I study this stuff. I currently just study political science. They have said other stuff about history, but if I could, I would probably do history and do Western civilization or stuff like that. I think within that, I think understanding I don't know, just even understanding like power structures or how political history kind of unfolds is sort of really interesting, because I think everybody needs to be informed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
In what situations, Rachel, are you at your
What?
Rachel, in what situations are you at your most confident?
At my most what?
The most confident.
I think I'm a pretty confident person in general, but I think that I'm most confident when it comes to I think when I know how to do something, and trying to think. I think it's in the area I know well, usually debating history or politics. I think in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm trying to think, you mean, in life in general, I'm trying to think what I would most be confident, except for, let's see, I think doing that, or like, yeah, I don't know, trying to think, but maybe in the realms of like, I feel very at home in schools or reading or something like that. I'm confident in my knowledge. That's probably where I don't know, like, I think I'm most confident when people have respect for my ideas, as well. I think people have to believe, I mean, so some people like to hold on to their ideas, not let go, but I think in a lot of ways, if I'm in a like neutral setting that has some sort of learning to it, I'm probably most confident there, because yeah.
Okay.
So that, I hope I'm answering your question sufficiently.
You answered my questions wonderfully, Rachel. Don't worry. And just to turn it on its head, in what situations are you at your least confident?
Trying new things in general, like foods, or I like trying new foods when I'm ready. I like trying new, like, and areas when I'm ready. I'm pretty good at traveling, but I have to be ready. I have to understand what I'm getting into. I often research, even the simplest routes to death. I mean, I like to explore the area, but I like, in a lot of ways, I think, especially if it's somewhere I'm familiar, it's fine. I mean, and it doesn't mean I don't do it. I have the willpower to do it, but it's trying something new is often sometimes kind of rearrange my ideas. I mean, new ideas and sort of new books doesn't really bother me, but trying something new in terms of other things can be kind of like, I've been wanting to actually go to Europe, but it's kind of a anxious kind of thing. Like, maybe not. Will I get lost? I'll probably find my way. I find that when I get there, I find my way pretty easily, for instance. But I have to really be trying. I really have to be focusing and really exerting effort. And I often use a lot of like maps and stuff like that. But and conceptualizing the area. And once it's kind of strange. It's like I build a map in my mind. I'm not really spatial in a lot of ways. I kind of use concepts and ideas too. It's kind of weird. to kind of figure out where I am. But in a lot of ways, like even to the East Coast, I said I'd go for 10 years, and I had financial issues, but also it's like, you know, as I said to people, I'm here. I'm really doing this. Is this really what I'm doing? I guess I'm doing it. I wanted to do it. It'd be kind of, my thing is, I'm on the conservative side of politics here, and I've always thought, you know, it'd be cool to see the foundations of our nation. But then working myself up to, well, maybe I'll do it, is kind of, does that make any sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
It is telling me quite a lot. That is very helpful. Rachel, are you often socializing?
Yes, I find that socializing is fun. I don't know if I'm the most emotional, aware person in the world. I'm often blunt and to the point, but I think in a sense, I was talking about this to some people on Facebook. I'm pretty social in general, but I think as a blind person, you know, a lot of it is, oh, go sit in that corner. I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but often it turns out, well, we don't know how to deal with you, so just sit over there. I mean, and a lot of blind people have kind of, and so in a lot of ways, I have gotten used to inserting myself in a thing and talking to different people about different ideas. And I used to, because people would talk about, I mean, it bores me, you know, hey, my kids are fine today, and oh, my kids went to basketball and baseball, and I get mind-numbingly bored, but I try to find the people who I can, and I used to tell them I'm bored. Let's talk about this idea, or let's talk about the ideas behind this book series.
Yeah.
And so a lot of ways I would demand before, but now I just kind of socialize I try to find the most interesting people to talk to. If people are willing to stop talking about how there's some 1-3 goalies in the basketball league or something, or 3 hoops, you know, or whatever it is. I don't know anything about sports, but or that they just went to Europe and look at all the interesting, like it's not even history. It's just look at this picture. I mean, and it's not really it's more like my family did this. You know what I'm saying? And so if they're willing to talk about more than I would, but I usually walk around and I try to talk to people, and usually it works. I find that I'm not the most warm person, but generally liked in general. And if they're talking about small things, or they talk about something I like, I do tend to close off. But I have to have tried. I have to judge the situation and say, okay, nobody is willing right now. You know, in a group, oh, they're talking about this in this group, then I will withdraw. Like if they're talking about like, and they won't depart from this, and I'm not going to make, you know, I'm not going to, why don't you do this? But so it all depends. I think I'm pretty social, but in a lot of ways, I know I can also rub people the wrong way, because I'm very logical. I don't want to bring personality types into this too much, and I'm not even talking socionics, but I'm very efficient focused. I'm trying not to bring too much even MBTI into this, but and when I tell people about MBTI type, people assume, because people just translate from it, and then you can't do that. But in a lot of ways, in a lot of ways, for instance, like I'm kind of seen as very rational, and some people like it, and some people it really rubs the wrong way, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Rachel, sorry, Jack, can I ask a follow-up about this? Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so you just sort of describe yourself as not very warm, and it seems like you're describing that you have to make like a kind of effort to be social. Would you say that's accurate, or?
Not social. We can talk about topics and subjects. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about, like, if this is not hard, or if we're just talking about, if I found somebody who loves talking about philosophy, or Elon Musk, you know, like you're saying, I'd be fine in that conversation. You know, if I knew of something about Elon Musk, it's like, oh yeah, you know, I can talk about it. But if it's social, like, hey, how are you? You know, and I'm trying to get their feelings and stuff like that, I'm not very good at it.
Okay, yeah. So that's a really good clarification. So I guess let me ask, and I'm trying to ask this in a way like that makes sense. Okay, so if you're in like a social situation, like let's say you're at a party and people are doing that kind of conversation that you like don't really prefer, how do you go about like picking the group that you're like talking to or whatever? Like what's going through your mind?
This group is boring. This group is interesting. I don't know if I pick groups or I just go around and a lot of it is individual people. I usually do individual people. I mean, I sometimes do groups, but sometimes I think groups get lost and gets eventually back to this, hey, how's the weather like? What did you eat for breakfast? Like not even just as trivial as that, but like, oh, how's your kids this week? It eventually gets there, and it's and I mean, I can handle so much of that, but it's like, okay, so is this using it to transcend to better things? I tend to leave if I don't like the conversation.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead.
So I went to a Socionics meetup, for instance, and they're talking about it, and I didn't know anything about it, and a lot of it was, how sometimes in these groups, oh, I'm judging this person, or I'm this, and I felt like a lot of it was that, and so I see these in the MBTI groups, and I tend to not go into that. I mean, it's, I don't like INFPs, like for instance, in MBTI, because they are emotional and this, like I don't know how much you guys know about MBTI, but that side of it is okay. So let's not judge. Like, I don't usually in those comments I don't say anything. Like either I don't say anything or I move on. Like and so sometimes it's not just moving on. Sometimes it's just staying really quiet. It's like, and people are like, oh, you don't have any ideas. It's like, yeah, but I'm not verbalizing them. Otherwise I'd be calling you guys idiots, and I don't want to. I mean, not idiots, but and so some of them they deserve it, and some of them they don't. But I mean.
Okay. So yeah. So that also makes sense. So when you do look for, as you said, individuals or whatever that are like not talking about things like the weather or things that you think are more productive, what's like the thing? Is there like a thing that you look for in particular individuals, like their sense of humor, like their, I don't know, like something?
Their logicalness and their knowledge. I look for logicalness, knowledge. I like people who can match my thinking. I don't care about what subject. Even if I don't know the subject, I'll ask, then tell me more. I love learning new things. Tell me more. I went to the Socionics meetup, and I realized I didn't know anything about Socionics. It's like, I thought, how like a lot of people, or some people, they equate the two systems. I didn't know anything. So I was like, so what is this? I mean, I could read, but right then I couldn't read. I mean, so what does this mean? What does that mean? How does this make sense? I think as long as you're intellectually inclined, I'm good. As long as you're not talking at the, oh, well, my kids did gymnastics this Saturday and went bowling, and as long as that, I'm great. But I mean, and sometimes it can be trivial, but I try to go into the more. I just thought of something that kind of straddles a couple questions. I also like learning sometimes about, like, as trivial as teas, but it's not like, oh, I like this tea. I've investigated the methods and how they make it, and I've kind of experienced in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways, I've kind of learned a lot about stuff like that. Even I know a friend who was really into coffees, and I was like, oh, interesting. Like, it's not like I like drinking coffee and I have to drink coffee every morning. It's like, and my coffee routine is this, I drink 2 cups of more, and then so some people can talk a bunch about that, but this guy actually had some things about how people roast coffees and how coffees are generally better in a lot of ways. I'm like, okay, this is interesting to listen to, and it wasn't like this coffee is better than this coffee, and you know what I'm saying, without a reason.
Yeah. I understand. So it's not like, oh, I like Starbucks, you like Dunkin' Donuts. Oh, you're ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah. I find those. I would call those. I mean, I hate to call people names, but I would call it shallow.
It seems vapid. Yeah, I get it. So okay. So I have like a sort of related follow-up question. So it seems like you have like hobbies and interests that are maybe not related to like your primary study. So is there like a thought? Yeah, it seems like a lot. So is there like a thought process that goes into like picking these? Like, so let's say like you were interested you like had some sort of talent, like singing or something, and you could like so are you like, oh, I could take a bunch of singing lessons? And are you just like, great, I'll take a bunch of singing lessons? Or is there like something holding you back ever? Like what's kind of like, how do you approach these sort of hobby interests?
I think most of them are nerdy. No, so I think a lot of it has to do with my reading, or has to do with like intellectual stuff. You know, like I also like tinkering with technology, and I like talking to people deeply in IT and computer logic and computer programming and stuff like that. And I think I don't know if I consciously pick my stuff, but it's more like in the academics, like politics, history. I do like tinker and tech. I like musicology. I'm not musical. I can't sing. So I like collecting, and I started analyzing music. I took a class, but I also find that often times I listen to the words of lyrics, and I'm on the Republican side, but I do like folk music. I do like stuff like Pete Seeger, and I know like from like Lagas, you know, you're a traitor, and like I said, I don't mind if you have a reason, and he genuinely has stuff to say, you know, and so I listen to the songs. I listen, and I like music history. If you ask me songs about in certain genres, I'd be able to either talk about them or bring them up and talk about them or something. I would say I relate and don't relate to a lot of people, because a lot of them are like really nerdy, you know, like I like studying law and politics and history and economics, and I like reading and researching. I do like socializing and stuff like that. But a lot of my stuff tends to be in the more brainy disciplines. Does that make any sense? So in a lot of ways, I fall into like cultural exchanges and exploring different ideas, like in different fields, in terms of like how much I think about. Does that make any sense?
That does make sense. So I'm trying to ask this in a way that's, okay, maybe I'll give you like an or, like an either or. Okay, so you can tell me if neither of them apply, okay? If you were like to do something, like, so these are, I would say like a little bit, these intellectual endeavors, I would say they're like a little more passive, like it's not like, it doesn't require like a lot of like cost on your end, like monetary or time-wise or whatever, right, to like read a book or maybe, okay. But like if you were to do something that like required more effort from you, right? Like, would you just be like, oh yeah, like learning like learning how to dance, like doing like a dance thing or whatever, that's fun and I have an interest in it and I'll just go do it? Or would you be like, that's fun, but I don't know, like I have to think about like if there's a lot of like time involved on my end that will prevent me from doing other things, and am I really going to be like the best dancer, and like what's the point of this? So do either of you describe your point of your mindset, or do neither?
I think the first one more. But then I try to devote time, and sometimes I find I don't have enough time. So dance is a really bad example. I was like, I don't know if I'd enjoy dance. It'll be too. I don't know. It's almost too. I don't know. Like it feels boring to me. Like that movement, I guess But you know, it's not very brainy. But what I was saying would be, and I'm not trying to insult anybody. If anybody thinks dance is very intellectual, that's fine. You know, but whatever. But there was an example in on this group I was part of. It was like, also, who would like to have a German group and talk about German? Like, I don't know a lick of German, but if you would like to, I can join your group. But you will have to teach me. And it required a lot of effort and time. But I don't know if I have the time now. But you know, and Socionics and MBTI takes a lot of time. And so in a lot of ways, I've taken more time out of it, and I don't mind. I like learning. At some points, like, yeah, I do have to get back into it. I'll have to shelf this, but this is really interesting. Onward to learn it later. You know, like for instance, if that makes sense. Like even if I don't have time, I'll look into it and I'll pause it if necessary. But for instance, they're talking about German. It didn't work very well because I'm not very linguistic. Like I am bilingual, but that's because I came to the States when I was very young. But in a lot of ways, we were learning German. I know a couple of phrases in German now. I mean, there was several more problems with the group, how people didn't really want to teach it and just wanted to learn their own German, and how some people had more knowledge. And I was like, this is really hard to learn. You're not really explaining the concepts and the theories and how to say phrases and what they mean. And it took a lot of time, and it took a lot of my effort. And I think if it's interesting enough, I will do it. And often it's more intellectual pursuits. Like I wouldn't do something like dance or singing or something even more like, and it doesn't really matter what money. I'm happy to invest. Like I invested a whole bunch of stuff in microphones because I was really interested in sound engineering, not so much podcasting. I tried the podcasting thing that just didn't work. I didn't have anything. I'm better with a conversationalist. Like as a conversationalist, like I'm talking to you now. But so I went into how are these mic built and which one's the best and why are they the best and stuff like that.
Okay, so basically like if there's like an interest, so you find it really easy to be interested in lots of things. They just sort of, these interests like arise like spontaneously. You don't really like necessarily like, they're just like intrinsic to you. You don't necessarily like know why you're interested in things, but then like once you're interested in things, you just kind of like dive into it. There's no like backtrack in your mind going like, well, what's the point of doing this? Like, I'm not going to become an expert. There's none of that.
Not really. I mean, I try to be an expert in a lot of things. I do. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I know a lot. And people are like, wow, how do you know all that stuff? You know, like I'm like, I don't know. I just read. I just do, you know, and even if I talk to people about it, you know, like even not just reading, just so the knowledge becomes more just from book, it's more from anything, like because there's book learning, there's intellectual knowledge, and then there's more, you know, I mean, it's like learning Spanish. It's like learning Spanish, and you learn from the textbook, and it's like, but nobody speaks like that, and you know, so in a lot of ways, I try to refine these ideas by talking to people about the ideas itself, and yeah, I mean, and then so some things you can't, but you know.
Okay, so can I ask you, does this extend to like relationships? Like, are you just like, I really like this person, like I want to spend time with them, like let's see where it goes, cool? Or are you like, is there more of like, I really like this person, but I don't think they're like exactly the one for me, or I don't think like it's going to end up
the second one. In a lot of ways, I'm very quick, and people call me, "Oh, you judge too fast. You're judgmental of me." And I'm like, I can pick up, and I don't have to say you suck. I really don't have to say you suck. You're so horrible. I didn't say anything for this. One time I pick up really quick. It's just how they are. Like these people were really big into like laughing and talking about things, random things, and just fall themselves. And they, you know, and so I told them, hey, I like who you are, right? That's not like, I didn't even say this, but you know, like, well, I just don't know if you're my type of person to hang around. And they got really offended. I'm like, well, no, I can. And then some people are like, how do you think you know me? I'm like, I know you. And then sometimes I give these people a chance, or if they make, you know, like, so sometimes I do. And oftentimes I go, I knew from the beginning. I mean, sometimes I don't, and sometimes I do. But in a lot of ways, I do pick up clues very quickly about people, which is, in a lot of ways, I type MBTI really quickly because I can pick up their vibe. Are they going to be able to talk about intellectual topics, or are they not? Are they going to be an interesting person to talk to or not? Are they just about, you know what I mean? Like how, like in a lot of ways, I pick up stuff. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense.
And it's not like this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out like the extent. So I get what you're saying about like you pick up on people's like fundamental. Like, you feel
yeah,
like
I'm not sure what you're. I'm maybe I don't know. Like I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so you feel like you get people pretty quickly, and that some people perceive this to be like judgy or like okay, but I guess. And so obviously, like, if you don't feel like you're gonna like vibe with someone, you're not gonna like pursue them, and because you get these feelings pretty fast, and you feel confident about it, that determines a lot of your actions. But I guess like, is there, how much of like an open door do you leave? Would you say, like, are you like, so like, let's say like I'm in a romantic relationship, would you be like?
I'm really picky. I don't mind being acquaintances. You know, hey, how are you, Rita? Like, I mean, I'm not saying you're or not. Like, I'm using you as an example. You're Jack, you know, whatever. Both of you guys. oh, hey, how are you guys? Good, okay, you know, I might talk to you for 10 minutes. But then, if you really want to be in my circle of friends, you have to meet certain requirements. I think, for instance, intellectual vigor is one of them, and certain things, it has to be met. I think in a lot of ways, and sometimes not even tell them. So some people I just don't talk. I mean, no, I don't talk to you all the time. And some people, it's genuinely, yeah, okay, you're a great person. Like, you know, I'm not saying you're bad, but I don't know if I get bored of you or you get bored of me. And you know, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm in a lot of ways. I think I only have a couple really people that I would say that are in my inner circle, if you will. I have a lot of outer circle friends, but it's not really friends. Just, hey, hi, how are you? You know, and we might talk about an idea for 5 minutes or something. But or so sometimes it might just be me being really polite and saying, so how's your family this week? You know, I mean, and I don't enjoy those, but sometimes I do it to be, and especially at church, you know, stuff like church or school. It's like, hey, how have you been? You know, and sometimes we can dig, but does that make any sense?
I think so, yeah.
Yes.
One thing I'd like to ask you, Rachel, is how do you handle situations of conflict with other people?
With what?
Situations of conflict. Let's say you're there's a disagreement, there's more of an argument, can be get heated. How do you handle those situations?
I tell the truth, and sometimes it's not really popular. I mean, but I usually just says, well, this is reasonable, this is unreasonable, and I try to negotiate as much as I can. But it's like, look, this is unreasonable, this is reasonable, and often people get offended. Like, oh, you just said this, and if it's a disagreement, it's like there's a truth here and a false here. So we have to figure that out first. So, I mean, I'm not the person who you want mediation. I mean, maybe disability, like more legislative, you know, like different solutions, so sort of mediation, but not like a psychological. I have a fight with my mom. What should I do now? You know, it's like, how do I get along with her? Or we're having an argument. So how do we get, like, harmoniousness is not my thing. It's more about truth for me. Absolute. Does that make any sense? Like,
Okay.
Like, so in a lot of ways, I can be seen and very blunt and, well, you're making the conflict worse. I'm like, well, I'm just telling the truth here.
Okay. Okay. No worries. Okay. I'm trying to think of Rita, do you have any other questions you want to ask?
Follow up. I'm trying to think. If someone were to be like antagonistic with you or like combative, like what would your response be?
Is it petty or is it petty you suck? I mean, and it depends how close it is. And usually, I mean, sometimes I will say something, and so a lot of times I'll get, okay, whatever you think. I mean, but if I see them often, I might try to rationally argue it with them. Sometimes it's like, oh, but we just want, like, you know, and especially if it's over ideas and they try to antagonize me in some way because they don't like my ideas. In a lot of ways, I try to be again, it's this rational, this is the truth kind of thing. I mean, if it's just the person in the hallway that or somewhere at church in the hallways or out in the street saying you suck and call me names or something like that, I just walk away. But it all depends on, does that make any sense? How close, how often we'll see. Sometimes I'll argue with it, but
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. Rachel, what would you say are the main compliments and criticisms you tend to receive from other people?
You're really smart, as a compliment. You're really wise. You're really rational. I have this guy who likes me. You tell it as it is. You tell people things that people don't say. Or fun of it and don't want to say. you I'm trying to think. I've gotten you're really nice, but those are people who usually like my ideas, but I've also gotten you're really mean too. So I don't know if that really counts. But let's see. I might come back to compliments, but criticism, you're critical, you're judgmental, you're I've gotten a lot of you have no friends. You don't make any friends, do you? This is why people don't want to hang out with you. What else have I gotten? Oh, why do you hate people? Because I try to point out the truth about, I try to point out the truth in behaviors like social awkwardness, like why do this? Like I try to point out truth in a lot of ways, stuff like that. You're I've gotten some selfish stuff, but you're selfish or narcissistic or something. What else have I gotten? You're not very open. You're too idealistic. You're too idealistic. You're I'm trying to think. It's along those lines. I would say that the criticism described, and I don't know if we want to bring this into the mess, but you're a lot of the type ones in Enneagram criticisms, I don't know if you know what those are, like I've listened to them, have kind of been very true to me, because that's what a lot of people, yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that does help. Thank you. It is interesting. So
yeah. I think another compliment is you think a lot through what you're saying, and you have really good points or stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, but Rachel, it's I'll tell you where we are at the moment. Okay, both Rita and I think you are very likely to be a Delta humanitarian. And
okay.
now,
why Delta?
The Delta, well, because I think in general your values seem to be very oriented around extrovert intuition and extrovert.
What?
Your values most oriented around extrovert intuition and extroverted logic. It's the investigation of multiple interesting things which you can find useful, which you feel are useful, help you to grow, help you to develop. There's also a sense of good faith judgment in other people, wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt, but also assessing, are these people I actually want to, spend time with? Are they people who are, have some special qualities, or are they people who, are just going to give me anything which is actually useful for me to learn and grow? And so
interesting. What would you say? Because the other quadrant I was looking at was Gamma. What would that be like, for instance? I'm just curious.
Gamma has more harsh judgment. They are more looking for reasons not to associate with so many people. They're far more fiercely independent. I will do these things myself. They're more likely to hold on to grudges of people. They're more likely to take action against people who they feel have wronged them. In terms of their approach to extrovert intuition, they're far, whereas you want interesting things which are also useful. For a Gamma, they are more, I want to make a concrete achievement, and I want to be targeted towards my concrete achievements. It's less about just exploration. And LIE is probably the most exploratory of the Gammas, but even they are going to be rather more oriented towards what I think is most important, and taking these different influences to target towards a particular goal of importance.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I've been trying to get explanations like this from people for a while, so yeah.
Yeah, so Gamma would share with Delta this desire to find like individuals for like meaningful conversations in which you increase each other's like knowledge. they would share
Okay.
that. But the kind of what you describe as, you know, as opposed to like these sort of like more frivolous group conversations based on like, I don't know, like pop culture or like nice feelings or whatever. But what you describe is like this sort of like unbridled exploration of like anything that interests you is much more consistent with delta over gamma.
Interesting. Okay. That's an interesting observation. Yeah.
Now, the point of contention for us is, well, first of all, we both agree on delta humanitarian, in that it seems to me that extroverted logic, although you do talk about your intellect, you do talk about your processing of factual information.
Yeah.
I noticed that there didn't seem to be much, at least for me, in terms of introverted sensation, in terms of being more grounded in the day to day.
Yeah, I when I read that, I was like, I don't think I'd relate any to that. That's my problem.
You don't relate anything to being grounded in the day to day moment.
Right.
Okay.
In MBTI, I am introverted sensation, but that doesn't have anything to do with actual sense. It more has to do with facts and figures and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I don't think this introverted sensation has anything to do with me. So
interesting. Okay. Now,
which is why I leaned gamma, because LIE, because that has more. I'm like, I'm not saying I am. I don't need to be that, but I'm just okay. Delta makes sense, but what, you know, it's the kind of the.
I don't get a sense of any of that sort of extroverted sensation values, though.
No, I don't think.
What I was thinking was IEE for you.
What's that?
IEE, extrovert intuitions in the leading position. So the main thing is about the exploration of new possibilities, opening up new avenues, following your curiosity. And that's
right.
That main motivation. And that allows for extroverted logic to be more of a mobilizing function, something which you are quite proud of, something which you've worked to develop, to build up
right.
your knowledge, become more competent, and that you see yourself as being a competent person, having worked towards that. But it can take hits from other people. And it seems to me that introverted ethics is not weak. I can see you making these assessments, assessing how do I feel about this particular person, how much I want to relate to them, but that being blocked with extrovert intuition and giving people the benefit of the doubt. It seems to me that
so wait, my second would be what? So introverted intuition. I mean extroverted intuition. Wait, what? Wait.
I think that if your first would be extroverted intuition, your second would be introverted ethics. And the thing in Socionics,
interesting.
It's not, although it's strong, or you can make confident assessments of how you personally feel towards others, it's not nearly as pushed often compared to your mobilizing function, which is more active.
Interesting. So you don't think I'm some sort of T-type?
Oh, I don't. Well, I don't. Neither of us think you are logic.
Or some sort of. Okay, you don't think. Oh, you don't think so?
No, but
a rational type.
Yeah, yeah, a rational. Sort of a. A lot of people think they see TE or extroverted.
Introverted thinking.
No, extroverted thinking. I don't. You don't see that?
I think that you're a person who focuses on learning and self-improvement and knowledge, and you seek that in other people. And that's not to say that that's not what being a TE or extroverted thinking type, in a person who isn't an extroverted thinking type, but in a quadra that values that, will still have those characteristics. I think that if you were an extroverted thinking type, this conversation would have been framed much more differently. You would not have started with your personal experience. You would not have given your attitudes and reflections on like things that you're learning and people that you meet and conversations that you enjoy. I think that you would not you are like, to put it like sort of colloquially, you seem like much more introspective than that. And there's also
I think my introspective is last, actually, but I think in a lot of ways I'm more. I mean, not introspective in how I feel, but more how I, like, you know, sort of. Yeah, I can see in like the knowledge part of it, but yeah, I mean, what do you think of introverted thinking? Is that different as well?
Yeah, so I think that so you talk a lot about how people describe you as rational, and I see why you say that.
Yeah.
But there is a difference between there's a difference between like rationality and wanting to deconstruct and understand a person's argument as a way of assessing the objective world around you, and being an introverted thinking lead type. They're different things. So you, like, for example, you seem to not really choose your friends or conversations based on people who share similar like political stances to you, or yeah.
Right.
So
No,
you,
I don't want to be. I just want to understand. That's all I'm.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm not. I think
Yeah.
it's a misconception that introverted thinking types are quote unquote rational, like, and that if you're not an introverted thinking type, you're quote unquote irrational. So that's I'm just trying to clarify that.
Right. I mean, okay, yeah, because you guys call it ethics in the system. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean,
so an ethical person, a person with introverted ethics as a lead is not necessarily someone who's going to be not motivated by intellectual pursuits or learning about ideas or stuff like that. That's
okay.
again a kind of misconception. I can give you an example. So my husband is an extroverted thinking type. I would say we're equally intellectual and equally ideas driven, but when he starts conversations, there's like no talking about like his life or why he does things or like what he prefers and what he doesn't prefer. He talks sort of like an encyclopedia. Like he's like it's a weird question for him to answer. If you ask him like, why did you do this, or what attracts you to this, or whatever, he like can't answer it.
The thing, Rachel.
How about introverted thinking though? That's different too. You said.
So introverted thinking, what we call introverted logic, that's more about the structure of one's understanding. That's making sure what you have is all logically consistent. It's following a certain framework. It's assessing things based on, does that fit in with a framework? Does it all make sense? And people who are very, very focused on introverted logic in a very rigid form, they can often push away certain facts which can contradict their structures. Because for them, it's the coherence of what they have more important than how much knowledge they have and how accurate it is. How does it reflect the facts of the case?
So even if introverted thinking is second, it can still be this way?
Introverted thinking is second, it's less so that case. It's more, I'm wanting to make sure everything align, but I also know there's all these facts. So I'm going to change my structure as I take in more facts, but I'm always trying to align it up in this coherent way, which explains it all in that consistent manner. I didn't really see any of that sort of aligning of the facts, but more taking in factual knowledge and seeing what's useful from it. But when we have Delta,
if this helps in any way, I think in a lot of ways, I don't talk about like myself that much. It's most about topics. So I don't know if you still call me introspective. Like this is the most I talk myself is when I'm talking about these systems. But I mean, I find it interesting, but I don't do it all. Does that make any sense? I don't know if that still makes me.
That does make sense. Like, obviously we're asking you questions about yourself, and Socionics is about personality. So you would expect like a bias for like introspective material, but it is still the case that people, like, for example, an extroverted thinking lead type would answer these questions in a very different way.
Or introverted or introverted thinking or whatever, introverted logic type as a second would not answer this way. You don't think either? I mean, just wondering. I mean, I'm just trying to understand here. So
there'll be more of an emphasis on their positions.
Okay.
And for you, I didn't see much in terms of positions. Yet you said, "Oh, I'm more on the Republican side," but there was very much of.
Well, I am on the Republican side, but what I'm saying is I'm really on the Republican side, which is why people call me idealistic. But in a lot of ways, I don't mind talking to the people on the other side. So yeah.
Okay. Right. So what I would say is my sense of you, and you can totally tell me if this is incorrect, is that for you, when people call you rational and you make rational arguments and you really like ideas and debating with people and talking to people, it is like you're very good at and you're very confident in maybe like in using logic as like a kind of tool to understanding like how the world works, how people are thinking about things, like how a system is set up.
I guess you can say that.
But it's not like you think that everyone should like the means is maybe like this introverted logic or whatever, but the ends is toward understanding of like a kind of objective reality or understanding of other people. Whereas for a true introverted logic type person, it would be the ends. Like, does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's not to say that you're not rational. Like,
no, I understand. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this.
I haven't necessarily picked out a very clear formal structure to the knowledge you're taking in, if that makes sense. It's the more knowledge.
I don't think there is. I read everything. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing is that within Delta, we're looking for asymmetries, places where you're most focused and places where there's an absence. And it seemed to me that assuming Delta within that, I saw the biggest absence seemed to be that introverted sensation, whereas there were bucket loads of extroverted intuition. Whereas in the middle, we see, yes, very much of a pushed extroverted logic, and your pride is on your intellect, your ability to make things work, your ability to understand and take in useful information. And there's also more subtle, but still strong and confident in how you use it, that introverted ethics in working out your personal opinions about people, where some feels right to you, some feels good, someone feels bad. If you don't want to hang around that particular person, and that sort of selective based on personal attitude and criteria of what people are like, your rules for friendship, as it were. So I see introverted ethics there and extroverted logic there.
What's the person who's in terms of introverted ethics, right? As second, would they be? I mean, I would think somebody like that would be more sensitive to other people and wouldn't be as blunt, for instance, or is that not the case? Like, because I say what's on my mind and I don't really care what. I'm not very emotionally sensitive to people. I think emotions are. I don't really, as I tell people, it's not like I don't care. I don't think about them.
No, I think actually this is a highlight. This is actually what you're saying is really clear Delta. So like there's a distinction between sort of emotional sensitivity and like desire for like the group to be like having fun and like not being the killjoy at a party or like everybody's happy. And and the desire for, which is more Delta, for being like honest and transparent and truthful. And I would say that for introverted ethical types they will account for like maybe like whether they're going to particularly hurt an individual in like a particular way, like maybe I shouldn't say this exactly like this because I know that this person.
I don't think much about that in general.
So you don't say much about that, okay, but you do agree with the distinction that I made between the like wanting to be truthful and honest versus like not the party pooper or whatever.
Well, I guess I don't want to ruin a party. I think I would rather walk away than ruin a party. I mean, often if I don't really like a place where I really think it's not me, I would leave early.
Yeah. I mean, there is what we did find a bit more, what caused a small amount of disagreement between Rita and I, at least at some points, was the strength of extroverted ethics. Normally for an IEE, we'd expect extroverted ethics to be in the demonstrative function. So that would be like the strongest non-valued thing of this type. So normally they can be quite emotions driven. They can normally, they don't tend to create polarizing reactions in other people around them. They're more able to be sort of almost universally likable.
I'm a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I'm pretty likable if I don't go deep into things, but when I go deep into things, I can be very polarizing. People either love me or hate me. So it depends how much I open my mouth. And it really, does that make any sense? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. And
it does make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm not or I am. I'm just trying to. Does this still make any sense if I say, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. You're trying to give us more context. I mean, we've been
I'm trying to
interviewing
understand really well this concept and why I'm this.
But also some things we do, I'm also trying to keep in mind when typing is that you can't see. And so aspects of extroverted ethics like emotional expressions are not going to be things you're picking up. You're going to be very much about the voice instead of expressions, which would mean that there probably is more likely to be situations of disconnect which are beyond your immediate ability to.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, sometimes I can tell, but sometimes I do ignore it. It all depends. If truth trumps it, then it does that make any sense?
I think so. Well, can you explain a bit more about truth, just in that?
I think truth is very important, and that that in a lot of ways, if it's different from personal feelings, I think truth wins. However you feel about something doesn't matter as much as the truth of a subject. So let's say, I don't know, like sometimes a lot of this politics stuff is, I feel this way about a candidate. It's like, well, but it's not about how you feel. And a lot of it is, it's not about feelings. It's about, like, let's say if I'm leading a group, I feel this way. I don't want to do this because I don't feel like it, because I don't really, well, it's like, well, but this is the most efficient way of doing things, so we're going to do it this way.
Okay. Sure. That makes sense. Like, you're not going to always go against the grain. Like, yeah, there's a balance between, like, preserving your own internal, like, preferences and, like...
Or the efficiency of the situation. Like,
yeah, exactly.
The situation calls for it. So I didn't want to bring this up because people assume things when I do. So I am ESTJ and MBTI. So I'm very big on external efficiency. I'm very, in that system, I'm very T-based. They're very TE-based because of, I don't know how well you guys know that system, but in that system, I'm very, because I put the situation above anything else. So if the situation calls for it, I don't care if you like it, if you don't, you're doing it. You see what I'm saying? Like,
all of this is broadly consistent with Delta for me. Like, it doesn't distinguish between any of the 4 types within Delta. To me, it suggests, like, valuing extroverted thinking.
Yeah.
It doesn't suggest that it's a particular, like...
well, yeah. Or, yeah, okay. I'm not saying, it's just the first time it's like, this is really interesting. I'm not opposing it. I just want to let you know, I'm not opposing it, but this is the first time I've been said to be a intro ethics type. I think someone might have suggested it, but I've never understood it. But it's like really explained. Like,
I could sort of speak a bit more about LSE as well, just to contrast. So LSEs and Socionics, again, they're deltas. They're going to have a lot, though, of extroverted sensation and introverted sensation.
I don't have those. Yeah.
They're going to be very much in the moment and also very almost physically proactive. They're going to be going into new physical situations is not going to be something which you're going to feel less confident about. They can often push the envelope in a more physical, almost danger-oriented sense.
Yeah, I'm not that.
I also don't get a sense. So one way in which, like, extroverted sensation can manifest in, like, in LSE, for instance, is like, they can need to be dominant in certain things. Like, they can get angry at people who make them, who are putting them in, like, a weaker position. They can have a temper. I don't see, like, any indication.
I have a bit of a temper.
Okay, how would you describe your temper?
I think if it's not fair, or if it's not right, if it's not truthful, if you're not telling the truth, or if you don't want to give me a reason, for instance, I think in a lot of ways I think control. I don't think like a weak. If you have a better sense of an idea than I do, I don't. But if you want to arbitrarily control somebody just because I can, I think, for instance, that sort of, does that make any sense? Like,
Yeah.
like just because you can, just because you are the authority. So I mean, I'm not saying I don't say I buck authority, but I mean, I generally need some sort of reason why. Like,
Yes.
So this to me suggests, consistent with Delta, the way you describe it, weak and unvalued extroverted sensing, not unvalued and strong extroverted sensing.
I might also offer to that. I personally I relate very much what you say about that sort of when to be more forceful, about you need sort of a reason why, and I think it also points more to what we call the role function rather than the vulnerable function, because the difference is
what's the role and what's the okay, wait.
The role is something which you can do to a limited extent, but you don't like doing it. You'd rather not do it at all. But also, you can understand to a degree where it's needed, and you can understand certain rules or rationalizations for doing it.
Right. Okay.
Whereas the vulnerable function is more of a complete blind spot. You can't really see any
Oh, okay.
why you'd ever use that particular thing. And and it seems to me when you're saying that, well, I need to see the reason for it. I don't like arbitrary uses of aggression or dominance, but I need to see the rationalization for why you would why that would be justified. And it seems to me that there are certain norms in which you understand when it would be used and you could use it, but rather than being completely unable to use it.
So for me, Jack, for me, this might point to more like actually L role. Like I can understand why you want things done a certain way if you tell me like why it has to. So
well, this is what I'm saying, which is why I don't know, like, because you see what I mean, in a sense, I mean, I'm not wanting to be a certain type, but I'm just trying to piece together this and.
Yeah, we like don't know you like obviously as well as you know yourself.
No, but I'm just trying. I'm just trying to understand well. That's what I'm trying.
And we're giving you these like.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. That's what I'm just trying to say. Please don't think I want. And I know some people desperately want to be some sort of type. I want to be, and I've seen in MBTI. I want to be INTJ because they have this and they're super. Like I don't have any. It's like I just want to understand. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So actually, here again, it's you're like sort of affirming our typing of you as a Delta and even a Delta NF, because rather than have like an idealized type and want to sort of like fit yourself image to that type, you are like looking for an understanding as to why we would type you a certain way with like sort of a neutral, like no preference toward any type, but there's like a certain like desire to make sure that our argument is understandable to you and to make sure that we have like the right understanding of you and that we haven't like misinterpreted anything. And so there's like a desire for like integrity of information as opposed to.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Rachel and Rita, I need to go soonish. So there may be a question of us having more of a conversation a bit later in the chat, which may be if you have any further questions, Rachel. Would that be okay?
Yeah. Should we just do that over Messenger, or do you want to talk again, or how's that?
It would be great. If you feel that a conversation like this is helpful, we could also do that. I'm happy.
I mean, it's just faster. We can definitely do Messenger, but I can.
Oh, you want to talk?
Yeah,
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense as well. Okay, no, I'm happy to do that. Yeah,
I mean, with Messenger, it takes I write something, you write something back, I write something, and I'm about to go do something. So it's like.
No, I agree. Absolutely agree with you, Rachel. We'll do that. I'll have a call with you, and Rita can also take part if she wants as well. If that'd be helpful.
How much more time do you have left?
I don't. I got my fiance saying, "Are you joking? You said you'd be out," and so I got. To,
oh, I'm so sorry.
I got. Yeah. Okay, don't worry. It's not difficult at all. Don't worry.
I don't mean to be impolite, but yeah, okay.
So
anyway.
But yeah, I think I personally think IE makes sense. I think Rita seems to come around.
Sure. I mean, I'm just trying to process all of it. And if I have any questions, maybe we can talk again or something.
Yes, send me questions whenever you want, and when you want a discussion, we can have it.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Hope you have a lovely
Thank
rest of your
you.
day. Take
You
care.
too. God bless. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.